All right. Well, good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here. Thank you, Pastor Jack, for inviting us to be here today, and it's a real blessing. It's always like home here, so I always enjoy it. I get to teach on the pastor, and I got to thinking about it while he was preaching. I wasn't listening. I was right. Did I say that out loud? That's okay. I got a football game to listen to while Pastor Mike preaches later, so. Just teasing, sort of. Anyway, my high school team's in the playoffs, and I'm here, and my grandson's playing. So, what would you do? Well, if I'm going to get into glory, I'll leave the football game alone, right? That's what I heard earlier. I can remember back when God started tugging my heart on becoming a pastor. It was in Pastor Callahan's church in Pekin, Illinois. And I was sitting there at night, I know it was a Wednesday night, and I'm listening to him preach, and God just started tugging my heart, and I started, taking classes to do that, and ended up getting my first church shortly after that in Mapleton, Illinois, and we had a Christian school, and so I went and got a jacket. It had the school logo on the back and all this stuff we did for the school, and I had, what do they call it when they sew it on your name on? Embroidered my name on there. And the lady says, well, you want me to just put Pastor Bob on there? I said, well, that's fine. That's cool. I was so excited to be a pastor and didn't realize it was ahead of me, but I was so excited to be a pastor. And I was over at Pastor Callahan's church one day, and Pastor Merlin, one of his senior associates, was out there, and he looked at my jacket, and he goes, passed on Bob. And I, what? That's what the R&O looked like, passed on Bob. So I threw the jacket away and went on. So went my pride of being a pastor. Finding your pastor is the most important decision you'll make outside of getting married. Finding your spouse is the most important decision. Coming to God is the most important decision.
Right.
We got a bunch of important decisions.
There's a lot of them. But asking God, once you come into the kingdom, asking God to lead you to your pastor is really the most important decision of your walk with God. Because that man or woman, whoever's leading you as a pastor, is vitally important to your walk with God. And most all of us, and Deb and I, we were saved under Pastor Callan. We were saved in our living room, but then we started going to his church at Pekin, and we knew the voice of our pastor. And we walked in the door in Kentucky after 15 years of being separated from him and said, we're home, because of his voice. And, Jesus, turn me over to Ephesians. Let's do this first. Ephesians chapter 5. And Pastor Jack, no, he didn't either, but he read the one part that he read earlier out of Ephesians 4 is important and really changed I'll get to it later, but it really changed my perspective on being a pastor, my responsibility after I got a hold of that scripture. But in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 through 27 says this, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. That love, like Pastor Jack said, is vitally important to our walk. It's what the kingdom is about, is love. And he goes on to say, in verse 26 says this, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of the water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church. And that's what we're after, is to become the glorious church that Christ gave his life for. That's why he's coming back for us, for the glorious church. In John chapter 10, just to prove to Pastor Sherry I wasn't asleep during her sermon last Sunday. She claimed I was, and I wasn't. So her and Debbie tag teamed and said I was. I mean, when you snore, it doesn't mean you're asleep, right? I'm just teasing. She was going through several scripture, and one of them was chapter 10 out of John. So if you turn there, as I started looking through that, I got sidetracked because as she preached on, I got sidetracked reading through that chapter. Because this is where Jesus talks about his pastoring in chapter 10. He talked about being the shepherd. Well, that's what a pastor is, as a shepherd to the people. And starting reading verse 1 says, and I've got a really cool Bible that Pastor David Guernsey gave us, and it's it really pulls out the meat of each verse. And so I'm not going to read each whole verse, but just parts of it. In verse 1 it says, he that entereth not by the door into the shepherdfold, the same as a thief. You know, as you look at that, there are people in the pulpit today that are thieves. They're thieves. I don't care if they're taking your money or not. They're still thieves. They're stealing your time from God. They're leading in the wrong direction. And a pastor is called into that position. Several years back when I was writing a lot, I've got a book that I haven't finished, and I flipped back through it. It's called Spend My Life With You is the name of the book. It's all about pastoring. It's all about ministry. It's actually a minister's book. And I was reading about how God called me into the ministry. But, you know, it was a calling on my life. I tried to walk away from it several times because I got frustrated, because I thought, well, I miss God. And God kept tugging and tugging. And that's what you want in a pastor. He goes on to say this in verse 2, but he that entereth by the door is the shepherd. And it goes on in verse 3, it says, and the sheep hear his voice. When you walk into a building and that man or woman that's behind the pulpit and that voice resonates in you, that's your pastor. It's sort of like when we came to Grace Ministries, you know, as a pastor, I still have pastors. I still have people that I have put myself under their direction. Why? Because I need to. Because it's important to my walk with God. You know, I'm 1 or 2 days older than Pastor Jim, but I still submit to him. Because why? That's who God put over me as my shepherd. Pastor Jack's like 3 or 4 years older than me, but I still submit to him.
You must be in the glory. You can't do man.
But you hear the voice of that person, and that's the voice you want to follow. And Jesus is saying, my sheep know my voice. I'm not stealing from them when I come to pastor them. When I come to lead them, I'm going to take them to a greater place in life. And that's what your pastor, in here, I'm assuming everybody here's family and no real visitors. I don't know, because I don't know who's here. But the thing is, if you're a visitor, let me say this, I'm going to get to it in a minute too, but what you want to look for is not a church that has all the whistles and bells, all the programs, all the stuff. You ask God to show you a pastor. And once he shows you a pastor, you're connected for life. It's a covenant that should never be broken. And the bad part about the church today, why we're not glorious yet, is because we keep breaking that covenant. We have to continue to stand. Pastor Callahan was our pastor from day one in our walk with God till he left for heaven. And the key is that we knew that. We sensed that in our spirit. And a lot of you here, that those that are at Pastor Jack's church, most of you probably from Pastor Jack's church here, he's your pastor. You should never divorce him. You should always walk. It doesn't mean that you're going to agree with that person all the time. You're not. But he has a heart for you. I have a heart for my people. And when someone comes after my people, no thieves entering my pulpit. They're not happening. It's not happening in our church. Let me go on. He says, the sheep hear my voice, and the sheep hear his voice, and the sheep follow. You know, I heard Pastor Jim talk several times about his walk in his ministry with Pastor Callahan. He said, I'm going to go where he goes. Why would I change? I'm paraphrasing what he said. Why would I change something that is perfectly set in stone for my life? Why is Pastor Jim where he's at today? Why? Because he was steadfast to his pastor. Yes. You know, ministry we all do ministry. Okay? Some of us are in office for a season in our life, for whatever. Pastor Jim was a pastor for 30 years. But now he's the apostle of this ministry. It's a new season in his life. You know, and if you're hungering, if God's stirring in you and say, I'd like to be a pastor, understand what comes with it. I'm going to get into that in a minute. What I'm looking at in a minute here is 4 things that Jesus provides for us as pastors to do. And he goes on in this passage, though, he says in verse 7, and then Jesus said, I'm the door of the sheep. Jesus says, I'm the pastor. I'm the shepherd, and I understand that. I'm an under shepherd. I serve under him, and I'm supposed to do my job that way. He goes on to say in verse 9, by me, if any man enter into it, he shall be saved. Verse 10, the thief comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. I've come that they have life. A pastor comes into your life to direct your life in a way that nobody else can. You know, been a Christian for 40 years, over 40 years now. And I've had one pastor in my life, and that's Pastor Callahan. And I served another man of God for several years as he was my pastor, sort of, but he wasn't really. Pastor Callahan was always the person that led me. You know, when I first started preaching, I used to get, we pastored in a town right next to where Pastor was in Pekin. And I'd go, we didn't have Sunday evening service or Wednesdays, so I'd go to Pekin and listen to Pastor preach. Buy the tape, take the tape home, and preach it. After we came into the ministry with Grace Ministries, every week we get in the mail 3 or 4 cassettes, and then they went to the CDs for a while. Every week. Why? Because the way he taught was, if you hear it, and I heard him say it from the pulpit sometimes, if you're not going to take that home and preach it, he says, because I am. Why? That's how you learn to do those things. You take the knowledge of Pastor Jim. Take the knowledge of Pastor Callahan, Pastor Jim, Pastor Jack, Pastor Sherry, Pastor Mike. You take that knowledge home and you feast on it. We used to teach small groups. That's how God called us. Our first step into ministry was small groups as a leader. And we take the pastor's CD home or tape home and we listen to it. And then we reinvest it into the people through our voice, through what God spoke to us about that message. And so you take that. He says, look, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. I've come that they have life. A pastor comes to change your life if we do our job right. You know, when Jesus spoke, there's 2 things he spoke with. One was with compassion and one was with authority. He coupled those together to minister to those men and women that he was ministering to. And that's what we're supposed to do. As a pastor, we come with authority, and sometimes it can be tough. We have to deal with certain things. But it's always out of a compassionate heart. One that's always best for the people around us. We had a situation in our church one time. We were in Metamora. A lady came up to me and said, I need to speak to your people. And I don't remember exactly how I reacted, but it was out of character. I turned and I said, you will never be in my pulpit. And that's just not the way I usually act. But I was protective of my people. You know, you have to protect. A pastor protects from the wolves. Yes. They protect from the wolves that want to come in and devour. You want to take your life with God and change it to their direction. You have to be careful who you listen to. It's important that you understand what they're saying. He says on verse 14, I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep and I am known of mine. He says, they know me and I know them. You know, I don't care where Pastor Jack is in the United States. His phone's always on. He's always answering it. Someone's always calling him and he's dealing with, he's in Illinois. He's dealing with problems sometimes back here, meeting the needs back here. And it's not that he doesn't have people here that can't do that. That's just who he is. He moves that way. You know, Jesus gave us, I believe, 4 tools in that we as pastors need to use to minister to people. And if you're pastor, I know the good part is every one of you in this room have a pastor that uses these 4 tools already. The first one is Jesus loved the people. The second one is he challenged the people. The third is he guided the people. And the fourth is he anointed the people. Turn with me over to John chapter 13. In John chapter 13, you know this passage. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. It's important that we understand that if God is love, then we're supposed to be about love. Wherever we go, we're supposed to love people. We're supposed to look at people with the eyes of Jesus. Well, what are those eyes? He saw in you and me things we didn't even see in ourselves. He saw in you and me tomorrow. I mean, as I was growing up, as I was doing, I wasn't as crazy as some of these other people around here. I may look like a druggie, but I didn't do all the drugs they did. Pastor Cherry. I was talking about these two over here, Pastor Cherry. Other than I was sort of looking at Pastor Mike because I know where he came from. The thing is that he saw all of us somewhere we didn't know. I think it's Kim Clement had a phrase that says, I had it written in front of one of my Bibles. Somewhere, yeah, exactly. He says, he tells people, I see you somewhere in the future and you look much better than you do right now. That's how Jesus sees us. When we stumble and we fall, the pastor that's in him, no, it's okay. It's okay. Get back up, walk some more. See, that's what your pastor is about. Your pastor is somebody you're supposed to be able to come to, and they're there for you to help pick you up, to brush you up. They might scold you. But if you remember correctly, when you were growing up, your mom and dad scolded you for a reason, to take you out of the danger zone and to bring you back into where you're supposed to be in safety. You know, my dad, he's been in heaven for about 16 years now, but it just popped in my head, so I'll share it. I was in the Army. I was married. I was going to Vietnam. I had a few days left, and I was headed to Vietnam. Well, my mom and dad smoked all my life. And if you're a smoker, this is not anything against you. They smoked all my life. And I remember riding on vacation, and you have back in the old cars where the windows would roll down or the window would roll down and stuff. There was always a little spot where fresh air would come in from the outside. I'd stick my nose right back there because they were smoking. So anyway, I'm standing at the front door. Somebody had came by, and I was talking to him. I had a cigarette in my hand. Now, my mom and dad didn't know I smoked it because I started smoking in the Army. And I'm standing there. And my dad pulls up, and I didn't think anything of it. And pretty soon this friend of mine leaves, and I'm standing there, and my dad looks down at my hand. Then he looks up at me, and he looked back down. He said, "What's that in your hand, boy?" Now, I felt like I was 12 again. Now, my dad was a smoker, but what he didn't want was his sons to smoke. He was connected. And I can remember after I got saved, I smoked for about a year. My brother said I probably would have went to hell during that time, but I don't think that's in the Bible. But, hey. The thing is that I smoked for about, I remember I was sitting out in front of my mom and dad's house, and I'm out there, I light up a cigarette, and my dad says, "I'm going to pray anything happens to you so you quit smoking." I'm thinking, anything? That's a pretty bad prayer, isn't it? Anything? But the thing is, as a parent, they never want their children to be off track. They want to see the stuff coming. Well, that's what a pastor is. They want to see the glory in you. Because if the glory is resident in you, it's going to spread through the congregation. And so when you get off track, they're going to usher you back in. And May's time, like I said, but they're going to love you into that. He says, love, that we love one another. We walk into church from the pastor all the way through the congregation. It should be a love fest. Yes. We should be at a level where I can't wait to get back to service. I can't wait for the day that it is 24 hours a day. I have always believed the church doors should never be closed. It should be teaching all day long, every day. The thing is that he says that we love one another he goes on to say, as I have loved you. He's telling the disciples, love one another as I have loved you. Without any spot or blemish, Jesus loved the disciples. Now, again, we're going to get to a minute where he challenged them. He corrected them. And that you love one another. Verse 35, by this all will know that you're my disciples, if you have love one for another. The most disappointing thing as a pastor that happens in the church is when you see the infighting of the people. Because we love everybody in the church. And we see this one over here siding off with this one. And realizing the friction can grow to a cavern or a chasm, a gulf that can really destroy a church. And it may be one of you got offended at the other. You're not supposed to be offended. You're not supposed to get offended. If you say, well, they offended me, well, then that's your problem. That's your fault. You fix it. It's your choice. Thank you. You fix it. Forgive them, because that, I teach all the time in the counseling office, forgiveness is so important. It changes me, but it affects everybody else. Yes. If I walk in forgiveness, it affects everywhere I walk. Nobody can offend me. Nobody can hurt me. It's like a shield of protection. Because I choose not to. I mean, I've spent 40 years in the ministry. I've had some people come at me. You don't have to be 40 years for that to happen, but it's happened. And it's taken me a while to understand that I finally have gotten to a place since really 2013. God, I'm on my, soon is tomorrow, my 8-year birthday. I was raised from the dead 8 years ago, tomorrow, in Ghana. Did you realize it's tomorrow? I know. And it's like, I heard that. And I haven't even picked on you. That's the sad part. Now, I'm not just going to listen to the football game when you preach. I'm watching the whole game. But we love one another, so it's okay. The thing is that God showed me back then not to walk in any of that ever again, not to get caught in any of that again, but to live at peace with everybody. If the pastor does those things right, it spreads to like priests like people. And it's important. I hear that all the time. I'll hear Pastor Jim's voice in me, like priests like people. And it's his voice that rings true because he's always said that. The key is that as a pastor does their job right, we all grow. We all get better at what we're supposed to do. The second thing is, I said, he challenged the people. If you turn over to Matthew chapter 14, verse 28, it says this, and Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come onto the water. So they're in the boat. Jesus is walking out across the lake, and Peter says, if it's you, then command me to get into the water. So Jesus said, come, it's me. Peter starts walking. You know this story. Peter starts walking on the water. The waves slap. Now, first off, have you ever tried to walk on water? Me either, and I'm not going to. I shouldn't say it like that, but I don't even like water. Haven't showered in 40 years. Just teasing. But I don't like water in my face at all. I have this needless information, but I have 3 wash rags when I shower. I have the one I'm going to wash my body with. I have one that I wipe my face off to keep it dry when the water gets in my face. Because I don't like the... Now y'all got the visual, right? I don't even know why I said it. Well, let me go on with the scripture here. And so Peter gets out there and starts walking on water. And he starts to sink. He saw the waves. He saw the trouble coming at him. How many times have we been in the middle of a situation and we know Jesus has got us, is right there with us, but we see the situation increasingly get worse and we start to sink? Now, what Jesus says to him in a minute, in the next line, he says, and immediately Jesus stretched out his hand. Jesus never leaves our side.
That's right.
He's always there. The thing is your pastor is really similar to that. They're always there. I have over the years being in ministry where people say, well, I didn't want to bother you. It's not a bother. That's why we're here. He goes on to say this. He says, he reached out his hand and caught him and said, oh, ye of little faith. Now, you could read that wrong, but Jesus was challenging him to grow. When the situation gets rough, raise your faith to the next level. Learn to walk. You get into the water. What is the verse says? I walked in. I was ankle deep. Then I got a little bit deeper. I was knee deep. I got a little bit deeper. I was hip deep. Get your faith at a higher level so that when the struggles come, they don't bother you. How do you get it at the deeper level? You come into the fellowship of believers and you sit next to someone you love and sit next to you and you listen to the man or woman that you love teach you the word of God. That's what a pastor does. And they got back in the boat and the wind ceased. Now, Matthew chapter 8, verse 26 and 27, it says this, but he said to them, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Again, Jesus is challenging them to get stronger. Over the years of ministry, there's been times where I preached a message or this or that, and people get mad, they get offended, and they don't come back. Well, I'll pick up my father-in-law for a moment. He's been in heaven about 8 years now. And we invited him to church, Pastor Callahan's church in Pekin. And Pastor's preaching. Now, Pastor Callahan didn't know him from Adam. And besides that, he was short. You couldn't have seen him sitting down in the pews. But the thing is, he gets out. He was so mad when we got back to the house. We were so excited he was there, and Deb's mom was there, and the whole family was there. And we got home, and he was angry. You told that preacher about me. He preached right towards you. No, that wasn't us. That was the Holy Spirit directing that word right to your heart. But people do that all the time. He would never go back. But before he went on to heaven, he came to the Lord with full capacity, love of God in him. The thing is that when the pastor preaches, they don't have you in mind. Matter of fact, most of us, when we preach, we're going, oh, wow, I don't know if I can preach that. I just had to walk through that myself. Yeah. I mean, there's times I got done preaching, looking at my message, I thought, was this for the people or was this for me? It's always for you first as a pastor. That's the reason why you get it. The thing is it helps all of us. See, it's a challenge. It's not a reprimand. Jesus wasn't reprimanding the disciples. He was challenging their growth. He was challenging them to get stronger in the word, stronger so that they could be the men and women that they were called to be. And everybody has that mustard seed faith. Am I correct? That's what the word says? Well, see, it's my job as a pastor to challenge and grow that seed in my people. They're my responsibility. I heard Mark Barclay last Wednesday I was down here? I have been down here so much, I'm just going to take residence. I need to get a driver's license down here. Then I could get my concealed carry card down here, the whole thing, and it would be I could buy weapons down here. I can't say weapons in Illinois, they're guns. I don't know why I got up on that either. But the thing is that I heard him say that a lot of times we get that mustard seed and people just, so that's all you have and that's good enough. No, that's not what it means. A seed grows. And it's like a tree is a nut that held its ground. A seed that held its ground, but I like the nut one better. As a oak tree is a nut. You've heard that, right? See, I got one in my favor. Debbie looks like, what are you talking about? Lynn knew what I was talking about. Okay. Thing is that we have to make it grow. And that's the pastor's responsibility to instruct, to challenge, to give you opportunity to grow. As Pastor Jack said, when the glory comes, there's going to need a lot of us doing what we're supposed to do. Our church, you can throw a stone and not miss a pastor. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them in our church, and we're not a big church like this. But you know why? People would ask me, why? It's because I'm building a foundation. For when the growth comes, we're ready. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be looking in the distance as Christ looked in the distance. So he loved them, he challenged them, and he guided them. Matthew chapter 4. Think about it as I'm giving you these 4 points. Think about your pastor. Do they love you? Yes. Do they challenge you? Yes. Are they guiding you? And I say they are too. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. And Jesus, walking in the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. He said to them, follow me. Follow me. It's important when your pastor leads you that you follow. You know, it's one thing to be a leader. It's a whole nother one to have actual followers, so you truly are a leader. We had a motorcycle rally in Illinois one time. Pastor Jim and Jack were up there, I think. And I had one of my associates leading because I didn't ever like leading the rally. I just wanted to be in the thick of the group. And I looked out. We're going up this hillside, and I looked out, and there's Rick way out. He's probably a quarter mile ahead of the nearest bike. And the Lord said, you can't be a leader if nobody's following you. It wasn't that. Rick was just enjoying the ride. He just do. You have to know Rick. He just up there and he's enjoying it. And I told him at the next stop, I said, Rick, stay a little bit closer to everybody. Oh, I thought, it's just Pastor Rick. But the thing is that when they lead, you need to follow. As Pastor Jack takes us on a lot of trails, doesn't he? And if he ever tells you that he's got a shortcut, don't go. Do not go. We were in Tennessee first time, and I have Debbie on the back of his Sportster at the time. And we're going from from Pigeon Forge to Gatlinburg, and we're just around the bend. We're in Gatlinburg. No, he goes up a mountain, and we're up a mountain. Pretty soon we got to get up there, and he realizes he made a wrong turn. So we start coming back down the mountain, and the only thing I can think of is how he's going to get 3 bikes back down that mountain by himself, because the other guy who was with us wasn't happy either. I had never really rode much with Debbie on the back of a bike, and I'm riding a mountain coming up. We came up to a stop sign like this, so we had to make a dead stop to go this way, and we're going down the mountain, and we're still going up. It was, Patty, exactly. So we got somebody. The thing is that you can read your own license plate with Pastor Jim, though. Anyway, but I follow. I mean, that's what you do when you're riding like that. You follow the leader. You follow that person that's in lead. Why? Because they're going to take you to a destination. A pastor's job is to take the congregation to a destination, which is to the glorious church. Exactly. The key is that, in order for you to arrive at that destination, you have to be steadfast to that person. Whether it be Pastor Sherry's church, Pastor Jim's, Pastor Jack's, or ours, or Pastor Mike's, any of us. We have a destination in mind that God's given us. And we have a responsibility to get there and to take people with us. In John chapter 21, starting to read verse 20, says this, Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciples whom Jesus loved following, who also learned leaned on his breast. Debbie reads for me a lot. Let me back up. Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following. Now, who is he talking about? John, right? He goes on and says, who leaned on his breast at supper and said, Lord, who is the one that will betray you? And Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, But Lord, what about this man? He's asking. Peter's trying to divide the disciples, and Jesus' answer was, If I will that he remain till I come, what is that of you? You follow me. You follow me. You don't worry about that person. You follow me. If you'll do that, and so many times people get off track, and you got to say, okay, come on back. He's reminding Peter, don't worry about what's to your left or to your right. You follow me. If we all did that in church today, the churches would be growing through the walls. We have so many. If people would just follow where God told them to be. There's not one pastor in this building today that hasn't lost people for no reason at all. They just left. They quit coming. They'll give you every excuse under the book. But what was the truth was they quit following who God told them to be with. If everybody was with me, that since we started ministry, we have a church of 500 people. We don't, because they quit following. Jesus said, Peter, just follow me. Don't worry about the things around you. He was there to guide them. He was there to direct them, just as every one of us are there to guide. We're there to love first. We're there to challenge you as the people of God, not to ever make you feel unwanted, unloved, and that's the reason why the love and challenge come together. Jesus always challenged them with love. He says, love each other like I've loved you. Be like me. Follow me in those things. And the fourth one is he anointed them then. After he loved them, he challenged them, he guided them, and then he took the opportunity to take all that together and anoint them in Mark chapter 16. Mark chapter 16, you know this passage. And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Now, those weren't pastors. They were disciples. Well, guess what we all are? Disciples. When we get to heaven, my guess is, now I may be wrong, Pastor Jack can correct me if I'm wrong, or Pastor Jim, but I'm going to say it anyway, this is how I feel. When I get to heaven, he's not going to welcome me home and say, hey, welcome home, Pastor Bob. He's not. That's not the title I'm after. Because the title I want is one that says, welcome home, thou good and faithful servant. We're all on the same level. We each hold different offices. Why? Well, we each hold different offices in our own family structure, in our own jobs, but we're still all the same here. We're the people of God. We're the church of God growing to heaven together. That's why it's important we have conferences like this where we have different voices. We have a conference back home called The Watershed now. Pastor Mike is a part of that. Pastor Jack is a part of that. And we come together with 4 or 5 different churches now. And the growth that the idea that God gave me, the vision that God gave me, was to bring these smaller churches together so they don't feel like they're alone. The pastors come in and we preach. The thing is, beloved, we're part of a big family. With one thing in mind, thou good and faithful servant, he says, preach the gospel to every creature. That's your job. You may not be a pastor, but you're still supposed to be a preacher. Goes on to say this, he who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. These are the signs that will follow them that believe. They'll cast out demons, they'll speak with new tongues, they will take up serpents. If they drink any deadly thing, by no means it will hurt them, and they will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. He's giving them a commission to go out and commission others, you and I, for example, to do it too. You know, long before we were in the ministry, long before we were pastors, Deb and I are senior pastors, we're the lead pastors in Groveland. And we did get a building given to us. Actually, it's the second one that was given to us. And the thing is that those days are coming, and they're coming rapidly. There's going to be a whole lot of churches that need to close. And the people that are being misled there by the thief are going to come into your group. And you're going to spread the love of God to them and challenge them to grow their faith. But that's your job, because it's the work of the ministry. That's what we're for. Is to teach others to do the work of ministry. You know, the first church I ever pastored was a Christian church, Restoration Movement, and they hired me. What was interesting is there is passages on being a hireling and things like that, and I was a hireling, and they thought they paid me a few dollars a week, and I needed to do it all. And they didn't want me sitting in the congregation. They want me sitting on the platform. So people come in, they can see who it is. The thing is I didn't have a voice in that church other than Sunday mornings. I could preach, but I didn't have a voice in the board meeting. I didn't have a voice in what the church did or anything like that. It was just the way it was with that board. It's important that the voice of the pastor be heard. And I'm not a dictator by any means. My management skills are very laid back. I believe in people. I believe that God brings the people into the church that will give you every part of the church, part of the need of the church met. I look at this church, I look at Pastor Jim's church, I look at Pastor Sherry's. There's people there that come in and they have a calling. They have a part of the ministry because the calling is different than mine. I may preach, but Debbie will tell you I'm not real handy with a lot of other things. She didn't marry her dad. He could fix anything under the sun. I said, well, I'll call somebody. Well, and there was a day. Now that dads are gone, we got to call somebody because Bob didn't learn, you know. But that's not my vein, you know. We have people in our church that just, Pastor Rick is just one of those guys. I can call him and say, hey, this is going on, that's going on, and he'll take care of it. You know, and there's other things. The thing is that's why you brought together in this body. Those of you that are here, that are always here, your place is here. Pastor Callahan once stopped me coming up to the platform at a word rally. He stopped me, pulled my arm, he says, Bob, is that the bad arm?
I'm good.
Okay. That's a healed arm. That one's totally whole.
I'm fine. Go ahead.
No, I'm not going to fall. Can't. That's where the staples are. If you'd learned how to write that thing, you wouldn't have been in trouble. No, that's not true. I'm just teasing, sort of. But no. He needs 3 wheels is what he needs, right? I don't even know where I was going. I have no idea where I was going now. Yeah. Take the shovel back. Grab my arm. Thank you. Somebody was listening. My favorite granddaughter. Anyway, he grabbed my arm. He said, Bob, you have a place here. You just got to figure out where it's at. And that was a challenge to me. It was a tender guiding of my pastor telling me to find the spot. If you're wondering what your spot is and you're part of this church, ask God. Just start stepping out and doing things and see what God opens the doors for you. You may be the pastor of a church someday. You may be an evangelist. We're all evangelists. Thing is this, God's going to start you at a place that is most comfortable for you. Because they said in chapter 4 of Ephesians, like Pastor started with, is that we're all called into the ministry. Our jobs is to teach you to do that work of the ministry. And it's important that we do our job right. We're going to do it with love. We're going to do it with challenges. We're going to do it with guidance. And we're going to do it with anointing. And we do those things right as pastors, the glorious church will be upon us. Pastor Jack.